There's this huge assumption in the business world that it pays for a company to do good. We hear it all the time. Doing good is good for business. But what if the people with the real money, the bankers, see things completely differently? Today, we're going to look at what the cold, hard numbers actually say about the price of being a good corporate citizen.
And look, this isn't just about my opinion or some corporate PR spin. We're diving deep into a really important academic study by Alan Goss and Gordon Roberts. They dug through thousands of real-world bank loans to get to the bottom of this. So, it all boils down to this one big question, right? When a company spends its cash on doing good, does it get a pat on the back financially? Or, and this is the surprising part, could it actually get punished for it? Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to unpack the two big competing theories on this whole doing good thing. Then we'll hear from the ultimate judges, the bankers. After that, we'll look at the price tag for being bad. And finally, we'll get into the really surprising cost of being good. First things first, you got to understand that this is a hot debate. In the world of finance, there are basically two completely different schools of thought on whether corporate social responsibility, or CSR, is actually worth it. So on one hand, you've got the risk mitigation view. That's the idea that being a good corporate citizen is just smart business. But on the other hand, you have the overinvestment view, which basically says it's a huge waste of money. And these two ideas are in a constant tug-of-war. Okay, so let's look at the risk mitigation argument. Think of it like this. Spending on social or environmental projects is kind of like buying insurance. It builds up your reputation, it keeps customers and regulators happy, and hopefully it helps you avoid some nasty scandals down the line. Now, if this is true, a bank should look at a company like that and think, hey, this is a safer bet, and offer them a cheaper loan. Makes sense, right? But then, of course, there's the other side of the coin. The overinvestment view says, well, hold on a second. Every single dollar that a company spends on some community garden or green initiative is a dollar they can't spend on, paying back their loans. From a banker's point of view, this might look like a manager just trying to make themselves look good at the company's expense. And if that's the case, a bank should see more risk and actually charge a higher interest rate. So we've got two totally logical but completely opposite ideas. How in the world do we figure out who's right? Well, we go ask the people whose entire job is to figure out risk every single day, the bankers. And this is why their opinion is so valuable. The researchers call them quasi-insiders. See, unlike the rest of us, banks get a peek behind the curtain. They see the private financial data, they talk to the executives, they get a much clearer picture of what's really going on. They can tell the difference between a genuinely strong company and one that's just good at PR. And let's be super clear here. Banks have one goal and one goal only. Getting their money back plus interest. They aren't trying to save the planet or win a Nobel Peace Prize. Their motivation is purely financial, which, for our purposes, makes them the perfect, unbiased referee. So, to get the verdict, the researchers looked at almost 4,000 loans over a 15-year stretch. And here's the really clever part. They split all this CSR stuff into two buckets. The first is concerns. That's the bad stuff, like pollution scandals or governance problems. The second is strengths. That's the proactive, voluntary good stuff, like big donations or great employee benefits. And this difference is absolutely crucial. All right, drumroll please. Let's get to the findings. First up, let's talk about the easy part. What's the financial price you pay for having a bad track record? The results here, crystal clear, no ambiguity whatsoever. The study found that banks consistently, without fail, charge higher interest rates to companies with a history of these CSR concerns. If you've got a bad reputation, you're seen as a bigger risk, period. And we're not talking about some vague concept, we're talking about actual money. Companies with a bad CSR record paid anywhere from 7 to 18 basis points more on their loans. Now, a basis point is just 0.01%. It sounds tiny, right? But on a loan worth millions of dollars, that adds up to a very real penalty. Okay, so being bad cost you. Simple enough. But what about being good? Well, this is where the story takes a really fascinating twist that you probably won't see coming. This really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If banks punish bad behavior, you'd think they would reward good behavior, right? So does a company that goes out of its way to do good get a discount on its loans? And the answer the researchers found is, well, it's complicated. Their reaction isn't a simple yes or no. In fact, it depends almost entirely on one thing: how financially healthy the company is in the first place.
Okay, you really want to pay attention to this slide because this is the whole shebang. Let's walk through it. Look at that top row. You've got a high-quality, financially solid company. It spends money on good deeds. What does the bank do? Nothing. They're totally indifferent. No discount, no change in cost. Now look at that second row. This is a low-quality, financially weaker company. When it spends money on the exact same good deeds, it gets punished with higher loan costs. Let that sink in.
I mean, put yourself in the banker's shoes for a second. If a company is already struggling to make ends meet, and you see them spending money on things that aren't essential to the business, even if they're noble things, what are you going to think? You're going to see it as a wasteful, dangerous diversion of cash. It lines up almost perfectly with that overinvestment view we talked about earlier.
So let's just boil this all down. What are the key things to remember? Number one, having a bad environmental or social track record will absolutely cost you real money. Number two, having a great track record and spending on good deeds won't automatically get you a discount. And number three, probably the most important of all, context is everything. At the end of the day, it all comes down to this. A company's financial strength is like a pair of glasses. It's the lens through which the bankers, the people who matter most financially, judge every single thing that company does, including its attempts to do good.
You know, the researchers themselves put it best. They basically said that trying to fool people with greenwashing, just for show, probably isn't going to work. The people holding the purse strings can see right through it.
And that just leaves us with one last question to think about. The bankers are quasi-insiders. They have special access. But if they can tell the difference between a genuinely strong company and one that's just putting on a show, who else can? And what does that mean for all of us as investors, as customers, and as employees?